This is my very first time in this theater, and wow, I was told not to look up because it would become distracting, but wow.
It's quite beautiful,
amazing,
isn't it?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Special.
We love it here. I'm so glad to meet you because I don't often get to interview somebody who grew up on Sullivan's Island, South Carolina, which is where I spent a lot of my childhood. I still go down there.
There's this amazing little island, two little islands actually, Sullivan's Island and the Isle of Palms, which are right off the coast of Charleston, which when I grew up was this sort of remote little beautiful,
very sleepy,
beachy village that I literally went to school next door to my house on the beach. And this was the kind of place it was where a pelican once crashed as we were playing in the playground, which was in the sand dunes. And it broke its wing, and I walked it home to the school next door, and my mother and I wrapped it up and helped it back. So yeah, it's like an amazing, special place. I know it's changed, you just said.
Not too much. I mean, it was pretty much all built out in the 1930s, so it's not like a resort or anything, sure. But that school's a lot bigger than when you were a kid.
We lived there at a time where they would rent it out during the summer, and we had no heat, and we only rented it during the winter because we didn't have any money, so we would get it for like 9 months a year, and then move out for the summer. And people would, you know, spend a lot of money to stay there for a week or 2 weeks, sort of like Airbnb at the time.
But you lived a lot of different places when you were a kid, though, too, didn't you? Like 30 different places or something like that. Why'd you move around so much as a kid?
My parents were, you know, very active in particularly protesting at that point nuclear proliferation. You know, they felt this country was spending too much time and energy building bombs and weapons as opposed to education and healthcare.
So this was like 1970s, 1980s, no nukes movement, exactly. Jackson Brown, Daryl Hannah, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But mostly in the South, right?
They focused on the South because that's where my father was from. It's where I was born. And it was a place that they felt needed the most attention, and they would go, and we moved to South Carolina because there was a nuclear plant there, and they would.
The Polaris sub base was there too, yeah.
Exactly what it was.
Right,
yeah.
Those giant Polaris subs, which look like whales of death, would come out right by Sullivan's Island. They'd come right out of the mouth of the harbor there.
My mother was standing on the deck of the house that we lived on Sullivan's Island. You'll love this story. And she looks off way in the distance. She was very pregnant. She was like 9 months pregnant with my baby sister. And she looks off way in the distance, and she sees this light coming towards her at high speed. And she's like, she starts to freak out and panic, and she thinks like, oh my God, it's a UFO. And it was an F-18 fighter that came and literally buzzed the house so much, it knocked her to her feet and almost sent her into birth. So because you know how the base is there. And so she immediately freaked out, called the base, called the military base, and they said, no, there's no such aircraft there at all. But it actually literally knocked her to the ground.
Did people know that your parents were there protesting nuclear weapons?
I'm sure they did it on purpose.
Wow. You should get a Senate subcommittee to investigate that for you. It's never too late, and you don't need any evidence at all. Just say, you're going to call my mom a liar, I'll take you to court. How come you don't have a Southern accent?
I hear like you, I had it beaten out of me, or at least, you know, not
I went to acting school, and they said no more of that.
Yeah, no, I showed up in, exactly, I had the full Southern, real, you know, more Arkansas, Charleston accent.
Because you were born in Little Rock, right?
Born in Fayetteville, Arkansas.
Oh, Fayetteville, okay, my apologies.
Yeah. But I did, I had it. I had, you know, a real Southern accent, and my mother also was annoyed by it because she was from New York, so.
When does it come back?
Let's get drunk, man.
I'm fine, but when does it come back? It is. Yeah, a little too much to drink, you get a little angry, you know, that's it. Yeah, or talk to somebody back home on the phone.
Totally.
Now, how hippie are your parents we're talking about here? Like how committed, how chain yourself to a nuclear reactor were they?
My father would be so disappointed that I say this, but on a scale from writing a sign out to being arrested and going to jail, they went to jail. They did. They believed hard in what they did. My father, it's cool. I watched my father be arrested a number of times for trespassing because that was a way to, you know, have a civil protest without any violence whatsoever. They absolutely believed in a nonviolent movement. But it was amazing as a kid when it happened because once they put all of these people that were arrested, about 50 people, inside these pens that they were made of gates, and I was this angry little 5, 7-year-old boy outside this gate, and I picked up a pine cone and I threw it across, not at anything, but I nearly hit one of the guards, one of the cops that was watching, and he had a, this is true, he had a automatic machine gun in his hand, And he turned and pointed right at me. And to this day, a cop pulls me over for a parking ticket, and I start shaking. So it terrifies me, yeah.
You don't keep any pine cones in your glove compartment, do you? I would not recommend that at all. Now,
Pine cones are my civil disobedience. I consider them nonviolent.
well, you got a new film. It's called The Most Hated Woman in America, which is about Madalyn Murray O'Hair and her abduction. I know I grew up, I was raised a Catholic, and I was, boy, there's nothing, no one...
You hated her, right?
Oh, well, I don't know, I hated her, but there's certainly someone you threw darts at in your mind, Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
Yeah.
If you tell the people who she was and what happens in the film.
Madalyn Murray O'Hair was this housewife who had a couple, maybe illegitimate children, lived at home with her very religious parents, and one day one of her kids came home and talked about how he had to say the Lord's Prayer at school. He went to public school.
This is in the 60s.
Yeah, and she said, "No, you don't." And he said, "Well, Mom, they said I do." And so she drug him into the school in front of the teacher and said, "My son does not have to pray." And the woman says, "Oh, yes, he does." And she said, "No, he doesn't." And she said, "Sue us." And so she took it all the way to the Supreme Court. I mean, I think the kind of amazing thing about this story for everyone to consider is that this woman had no money, no political power whatsoever, but she took this mission so far as to go to the Supreme Court and have the Constitution and the laws, well, the Constitution may be honored, it depends on how you look at it, but have the laws of this country change. And it's an amazing thing that she did, and in the process, she became a real true pariah to much of America. They felt like she had taken away this beautiful thing that happened at the beginning of the school day.
Right, the idea that there's sort of again, there's a perennial sort of football, which is prayer in schools.
Exactly.
And she's the person who actually stopped that from happening.
Stopped it, exactly. And her whole point was, you can pray, but you don't have to pray the Lord's Prayer. She said you should be able to, do a prayer from the Quran if you want. You should be able to do whatever you want. It should be your private moment. And so it really became something that, was battled over. There were riots over. She had death threats, and then she created what was called the American Atheist Society, and sort of took it and would literally go to a theater like this with a Catholic priest, and they would have these debates, and she would rip up the Bible in front of everyone and yell and scream. And
did not make a lot of friends.
She loved.
And it did not. This is I'm not giving anything away. It did not end well for Madalyn Murray O'Hair.
It did not end well, which is what I play. I play the guy who she helped. She was someone who believed in helping others, without a doubt. And so she took this guy who was in prison, and he worked for her. And in the process, she started showing him how she was basically taking the money that people were sending her for the work that she was doing, and embezzling it and putting it in offshore accounts. And so he realized that. And when they had that battle that you see in that scene, she embarrasses him, and he decides to retaliate by taking her and kidnapping her and her son and her granddaughter. And it does not go well.
Does not go well. And the police didn't even want to look because she was such a...
No, she disappeared for 5 years and nobody ever investigated, the police or the FBI, because they were so happy that she was missing.
Wow. Well, happy that you're here.
Oh, grateful to be here.
Please come back to Sullivan's Island. You still like it. The Most Hated Woman in America is on Netflix.